Alright, well, I'm finally back down here working on the plane again. Sadly, it's been over a month, I think, since I've worked on it, since I started assembling the skeleton here and doing some of the mass drilling, and since when I built those cradles that are going to eventually hold all this stuff while I assemble it into the skin. So the first thing I'm going to do today is deburr and flute and straighten the flanges on the rest of these inspar ribs. So these are the HS 904 inspar ribs. There are 6 of them, and what makes them different from these other inspar ribs is these have the notches and the different little tabs and whatnot where the stringers are going to go, and these are a little more plain, don't have anything like that. These are also spaced a little farther apart because they're more outboard, so there'll be 3 on this side and 3 over there. Interestingly enough, the plans don't actually tell you to flute or straighten the flanges on these. They don't really tell you to deburr them either up to this point. There's sort of a catch-all statement. I've noticed this, other parts of the assembly. There's usually a catch-all statement that, before you start priming everything and riveting it together, there's always a thing that says, deburr any edges and holes that haven't been deburred up to this point. So that would certainly catch these, but I kind of feel like this should be done before these are assembled into the skin for match drilling. You wouldn't want a sharp edge to scratch the skin, and most things are typically deburred and straightened before that point. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then I'll sort of carry on and pick up with where I am in the plans, which is to go ahead and finish assembling all these pieces, clecoing them together, and match drilling them. So away I go. Alright, well, I'm not going to waste too much time showing or talking about deburring yet again. I've got other videos that show that, and I realized I didn't even get any footage of straightening or fluting the flanges, but again, no worries. I've got earlier videos that show that, so I'll link to them here. Suffice it to say, I used just about every tool you could possibly use to deburr, including the little deburring blade and the 3M wheel on the grinder, little wedge of 3M wheel on the Dremel tool there, and even sandpaper, and of course Scotch-Brite pad. Now, I did come up with one little trick here that helped me immensely deburring the little notches between the flanges, and it involves tape and cardboard and sandpaper, and that actually worked so well that I felt like it deserved its own quick little follow-up video. So I won't dwell on it here because I've got a lot more to cover, but yeah, I'll link to a second video to talk about what I did there. All right. So I just got done deburring, straightening, and fluting all the flanges on the last 6 inspar ribs for the horizontal stabilizer. Used my my special flange straightening blocks again. I like those things. And even made a new special tool, real sophisticated there. But that worked so well for the deburring, I'm going to make a separate video just to tell about it. So anyway, now I can start clecoing all of these to the rest of this, to the front spar assembly I got going here, and match drilling. So really only one thing I'll mention here, with the exception of the 2 inboardmost inspar and nose ribs, the ones at a 9-degree angle, with the exception of those 2, the nose ribs and the inspar ribs don't share the same holes, which is fine. That makes it actually easier to get things clecoed on, but it also means that you do want to pay attention to which holes you're putting each thing in. They may be a little bit different spacing, so it may be almost impossible to get them in the wrong spots, but nevertheless, you want to pay attention. And I got myself a new helper there. And here I'm going through and just marking everything because you want to be able to get it back in the same spots. And I've put the skeleton away for now and gotten out the skins. Alright, so I've gotten my elevator skins out. I'm going to peel the blue stuff off the inside. I'm going to leave it on the outside for now, for just a little extra protection. And I'm going to go ahead and deburr the edges and then get them set up in the cradles and get them ready to start assembling the skeleton inside of them. So I forgot how much fun it was to peel this blue stuff out of the inside of the skins. Finally went and got the piece of PVC for the second one. This worked a little better. I didn't get it quite that tight on the pipe, so it was still a little bit of a struggle, but it was still easier. Deburring the edges of the skins here, nothing new. First pass with a file to take the little bumps off, and then run the little deburring blade tool along the edge, and then clean it up with Scotch-Brite pad. So now I get to finally use the cradles, so I go ahead and clamp them down to the table here and then lower the skin halves down in. And the skins are pretty springy. I've mentioned that before, so they're trying to spread apart. So even with these cradles that are much wider than the final shape of the airfoil, the skins do sort of expand and fill in all that area. And here I go take a measurement of the spacing of the inboard ribs on the spar and then just try to get the skins about the right distance from each other. Alright, so I've got the stabilizer skins in the cradles. The cradles are clamped to the table and everything is spaced loosely at about the right spacing so that I won't have to move things around too much when I try to put the spar in between and bridge both of them together. All the ribs and spar are marked so that I should be able to get everything, take it all apart and get everything back in the right order. And so yeah, the next step is to take the nose ribs off of the front spar and put them down inside of the skin halves and cleco them in place. And so now I'll get to find out whether the work I did shaping the flanges on the nose ribs here is enough to make it so that they're not too difficult to get down inside the leading edge of the skins. Alright, so let the wrestling match begin. It starts off well enough. I start on one end instead of in the middle, which was probably a mistake, but I wanted to do what I thought would be an easy one. And I was really more concerned with the tips of those nose rib flanges being too tight in the skin the way they were with the vertical stabilizer. No such problem there. That all went in just fine, so I was real happy about that. Now, one thing that this angle shows is you could probably see just how much the skins wanted to spread out and how difficult it was to pull in the skins and get them to fit the shape of that nose rib. So here you can see it's starting to become a problem, and I'm cramming towels and things down in between the cradles, trying to hold the skins in, trying to push them in onto those to fit the shape of the nose ribs. I'm also using tape up top to try to pull the skins in up there, and it's becoming more of a struggle, and I'm pushing on the skins and I'm squeezing and I'm afraid I'm going to bend something, and when I get the clecos in, then it starts pulling, spreading the flanges of the nose ribs, and I'm really starting to think that maybe it would have been a good idea to have built the cradles the way the plans described and more closely follow the shape of the airfoil so that it would hold the skins in. And so that's what I end up deciding to do. So I go ahead and I take the clecos out of one side so I can let the skin relax and it's not tugging on those flanges. And I take a step back and I end up getting a piece of plywood, tracing the shape of the airfoil on it, cutting it a little bit bigger than that shape, and then adding some duct tape to serve as padding. Again, just like the plans really sort of talked about, I only made one because I just needed it to hold the skin in at each rib point while I worked on it. I did find that it was a little difficult to get it to go on. The duct tape would sort of stick to the blue vinyl, and what I ended up doing there was I smeared some of that bow lube that I have, I guess I've talked about. It's like a giant chapstick tube of sort of a waxy lubricant that I use on drill bits and saw blades and things, and I put a little bit of that on the duct tape on the form, and then it slid right on. So between that and having my wife help me, there we go, that's the bow lube right there. So yeah, I still used the tape to kind of hold it together up top, and then we were able to slip this down in, and it held the skin in close enough for me to get the clecos in on the nose ribs, and then I was able to move that down and do the next one, and that worked fine. So lesson learned there. I think the strap-based cradles were fine once I got over this hurdle, but I found that having a plywood form that more closely followed the shape of the airfoil was necessary to get those nose ribs in. And so now for the second one, having learned a lot of lessons, I start in the center and do the inside two nose ribs first. I use some better tape up top to keep things held together up there, and of course I use my form to keep everything tight while I go ahead and cleco the nose ribs in. So on this one it goes a lot more smoothly. And, yeah, I guess just like anything, by the time I'm done, I will have learned how to do it right. So the next big step is to go ahead and lower the front spar, in-spar rib skeleton assembly down in between the skins, and that went really smoothly. No real issues there. You do have to take out the two inboard-most ribs, in-spar ribs temporarily because, as I mentioned before, they share clecos, share holes and therefore clecos with the two inboard-most nose ribs. But other than that, the spacing was pretty good. I didn't have to shift things around in the cradles too much to get everything to line up. So that was nice. And went ahead and clecoed those to the nose ribs. And then the nice thing too is it gives me a lot more skeleton structure to cleco the skins to, the front spar and even some of those in-spar ribs, which then helped pull the skin in more. Everything was really starting to take shape, and it takes the pressure off of the skins trying to spread out on those nose ribs. All right, so we've got the nose ribs, the spar, and the in-spar ribs all inside of the skins in the cradles. And that was a bit of a pain, especially the nose ribs. Actually, the nose ribs were a lot more difficult than I was expecting, not because the very tips were too tight, but because the skin, it was so springy and it was hard to pull the skin in, and now I realize why. It would have probably been better, at least for that particular task, to have built the cradles like they described in the plans. It would have been much tighter and held the skins in instead of these little strappy things. So, lesson learned there. Anyway, so the next thing I'm going to do, I've got the short and long stringers clecoed together here, and we're going to match drill these. I've got two sets of them. You have to be cognizant of the orientation that these go. I don't know, maybe you couldn't screw it up because it's got 5 holes, but all the holes are already aligned. But anyway, the angle on one of these is, kind of in the vertical direction, and this is sort of in the horizontal direction. So I'm going to go ahead and match drill the 5 holes on either end of these, number 30. Do the same thing for the other one, and then go ahead and get this down in the structure there. Well, I think I did a pretty terrible job of trying to describe the orientation of those stringers in relation to each other and the rest of the skeleton, but no matter, as long as you pay attention to the plans. So getting these down in there was not too big of a chore. You do have to take some of the clecos out, or at least take out some of the clecos that I had prematurely installed in order to pull the skin in tight. This was a case where having the cradles that allowed some freedom of movement paid off, because in the plans they tell you would have to lift the entire structure out of the cradles a little bit to be able to pull the skin back and get those stringers in, and I didn't have to do that, so that was good. And so now, as you can see, I've got everything all clecoed together with the exception of the rear spar, and so that's what's going in now. There's no up or down, left or right to that part yet until it gets match drilled in. And so I get it clecoed in place and go ahead and finally match drill the ribs, the back of the in-spar ribs to that rear spar. And that's going to pretty much be it for what was a very productive day. Alright, so I got a ton done today, a lot more than I was planning on, frankly, which means I got a lot done this weekend, which is great to be making progress again after about a month away from it, to tell you the truth. So, yeah, really happy. Got the whole skeleton built out inside of the, 2 halves of the skins of the horizontal stabilizer. Everything's in place, clecoed in. Really, the only ththing missing is a little piece of webbing. That's the stringer web right there. I'm going to save that for another day because I need to get out the angle drill and stuff like that. And I'll save that for another day. Shouldn't take that long. And then it's going to be going through and match drilling all the skins. So that will obviously take some time. But really happy with where things are now. One thing, this is heavy. I was a little surprised. I kind of lifted up on it a little bit and was surprised at how heavy it is. My wife kind of pointed out it's probably, you know, an awful lot of the weight is the clecos, and that is what it is. Duh. You know, bucket of clecos is pretty heavy, so that's adding a lot of weight to this thing. It's still certainly going to be heavier than the vertical stabilizer and rudder, but expect that. So anyway, I'm going to call it a night and go have some dinner. Earlier when I was recording this, I kept calling these wings, which is kind of sad.
Maybe you shouldn't be building a plane.
Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Okay. All right. So I'm really just doing that to have like a spot to like, chop it. Well, not so much like lip sync it, but to cut the video. The same reason people do this.